Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me. We're going to talk today about a really important issue, and that is why people do not like politicians. So, much of this is the Tony Tonkin theory and philosophy, and it comes from working as a social worker, working with and in conjunction with certain politicians over a long period of time. It also comes from my own personal background, where my father was very interested in politics, stood for politics, stood for Parliament on a couple of occasions, wasn't successful, as have I. So I understand the political scene. I'm a political junkie. I focus a lot on politics in general, particularly how it affects me and how it affects the community. But the reality is that the majority of us don't give a rat's ass about what happens in politics. Most of us are interested in specifically how our environment is impacting us at a number of levels, how we're surviving from day to day, how we're able to pay our bills, the cost of living obviously is party to all of that, and how we interact and react with each other, and some of the social issues that sit around that, whether it be child protection or domestic violence. Now, I've stood for politics because I believed that there were certain issues, particularly in the child protection space, that I needed to fight for. And the only way that I could fight for what is right and to change the system was to become part of that system, to be able to advocate at levels whereby I thought I could at least be able to implement some change. Now, I will argue that, pardon me, that there are many uh, budding politicians who think the same as I do. They wanted to enter politics because they wanted to make a difference. I also know that a lot of people enter politics to join a political party because they believe that party fits with their ideology. Now, and that could be that you're a conservative because you believe in conservative principles, uh, balancing the budget, that small government, all those things would make you a conservative. If you're a non-conservative or a Labor Party, then perhaps more interested in social change, social justice, maybe interested in improving other people's lives generally from a social structural perspective. Now, I know that there are a lot of politicians who enter with the best of intentions. I also know that if you enter a political party that has a certain ideology, there is an expectation that you cannot disagree with that ideology if you have a different perspective around the way that things should work. Now, if you have a different ideology or a different ideology around a specific issue, not overall, but around a specific issue, then there's a good chance that you might lose your seat at the next election. Find that there's other people might stand in your seat. You might be told that you're no longer required. So there are the problems that people have. Some of the best politicians are those people that sit as independents. Not all of them, that's for sure, because we've got our Senator Babbitts, and we've got Pauline Hanson, and we've got a few other independents who leave a lot to be desired, I must say. But the majority of independents are people who perhaps were a little bit more like the way I was thinking when I was running for politics. I had an agenda, I had certain things that I wanted to do, that I was a specific one idea party, that I wanted to make sure that those ideas were implemented and that at least I had a voice for the people that I was concerned about. But what I discovered in my journey into politics is that people on the whole, to engage people generally around the political ideas that you have, particularly if you're a one-issue party like I was, is really difficult because, number one, people aren't focused on elections. People don't really care about politics from one day to the next. People like myself and other people that read the newspaper or follow YouTube creators online or listen to podcasts or whatever it might be, we're rare. We are the minority. Majority of people don't care. So they're the people, the swinging voters perhaps, that is really difficult to engage with. And I've got an example here that I want to show you that was from Q&A last night, which I think explains why people are disengaged. And I've got a lot of time for Claire O'Neill, frankly, more time than I think Anthony Albanese has. But I'm also mindful of the way politicians speak and the things that they say, and how sometimes so disingenuous they may appear to be. And in this example, I find that the question is a reasonable question, but the way it is answered, and it's not just this politician, it's every politician, tends to answer things in ways which are not necessarily accepting the issue as it is expressed, but purely wanting to be able to explain the politician's perspective and to try to convince people. And I believe as a politician, you don't need to try and convince people necessarily about the path that you're taking. It's more important, and this is the case in terms of therapy, counselling, whatever you do, whatever interaction you have with anybody for that matter, it is important to be able to understand where they're coming from and not necessarily have an answer or a response to that that's going to meet that need immediately, because that's probably impossible. But at least for that person to believe that they've been heard. So that's the first point I want to make. And I'll just play this video, and then I will explain another way of looking at this in just a moment as well. So this is PK, and the question is about to be asked.
News online. Our first question tonight comes from Lyndall Fockins. Hi, Lyndall.
Good evening. Both major parties' proposed housing policies for first home buyers seem fraught with risk. Instead of driving up rates of home ownership, won't they just result in higher home prices?
Claire.
Now, I want you to respond to, watch how Claire responds to this, because I believe she gets off to a terrible start.
Well, thanks for your question, Lyndall, and I'm really grateful to you for being here tonight.
That's the first mistake. The first mistake is to, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that Claire believes that that she should be grateful for this person being here, but it's not the issue of whether this person has turned up or not. The issue is around the cost, and Claire, and it's about the increase in house rents and so forth. But Claire should have launched with that. So you can say, thanks for the question, I appreciate that, it's probably the right thing to do. But don't try and sound as if you're totally on their side, that you really understand what they're, that you're so empathetic to them, because basically you're not at this point. Because most of the time these people do not understand the degree to which this person who's asked this question is suffering or feeling the impact of the cost of living at this point. Claire doesn't know that, neither does anybody. And what you see next is Claire trying to explain to this person their perspective. The reality for me would have been, it would have been better if Claire had simply asked her if she could further explain what her position is and how it's impacting her. But this is something that, in fact, you never ever see, unfortunately, you never see a politician do it.
Maybe I'll just give you a little bit of context. We've got a housing crisis in our country that's been 40 years in the making, and our government...
So the other thing that she's done here is that she's immediately decided to blame somebody else for the problem. Now, I believe that's a fundamental mistake that most politicians make. That she didn't even need to do that. It wasn't necessary. It doesn't persuade anybody to necessarily agree with her if she's going to start by blaming herself. So the first thing she did was disingenuous, I appreciate you being here. And the second thing she did was to blame somebody else for the current situation.
Government in its first term has built the boldest and most ambitious housing agenda that a Commonwealth government has had since the post-war period. So 3 big pieces: we're building more homes, we're helping renters get a better deal, and we're supporting more Australians into home ownership. So the policies that you're referring to there are things that Prime Minister Albanese announced yesterday, and they are that a new Albanese government, a second-term Albanese government, would make 2 groundbreaking reforms for first home buyers. The first is we'd offer every first home buyer in the country the opportunity to get in with a 5...
So here she is selling her policy. Again, failing, I think, to understand where this person comes from, and even to a larger extent, failing to engage with the audience as a whole. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity that politicians have to have a focus group, if you like. Now, there are instances through Q&A where Patricia Karvelas will turn to the audience to say, you know, who agrees with this, or who's experiencing this, or whatever, and she'll seek a raise of hands. Now, it would be more helpful if the politicians did that, to start to engage with the audience, so that they could understand where they're coming from. So you could turn, in fact, a Q&A such as this into an exploratory experience where you're endeavouring to try and work out where the audience is at, not necessarily to solve their solutions, but to understand where they came from. And also, the thing that politicians miss out on the most, I think, is an opportunity to be able to seek solutions from the audience themselves. Many opportunities were missed out on this occasion, and it saddens me to think that politicians, after all these years, have never woken up to the fact that they could be presented with an opportunity to make a difference in this way. Instead, they feel that they must present their solution and they must have an argument with the other side about, you know, what the rights and the, you know, how their particular policies are so right and correct and well thought out, and the other side isn't. And then the other side will have the same arguments. And they'll criticise each other. That gains nothing, and it discourages people from enjoying the experience of meeting with politicians. Politicians are powerful people, extremely powerful. They govern our lives. The policies, the legislation that they pass determines how our lives will unfold. So, but to fail to engage with the community in this way, as Claire failed to do, I think is sad. And it is the reason why, at the end of the day, most of us will choose to be complacent, to not be motivated to vote, or even though in this country you're sort of compelled to vote, but to certainly fail to be engaged with the political process so that change can be effective. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Remember to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.